Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to our interviewing tips webinar. Our presenters tonight are Dr. Incalcaterra and Dr. Klingensmith. Dr. Incalcaterra has served as the program director for the General Practice Residency Program at Lehigh Valley Hospital in Allentown, PA since 1994, and also maintains a private practice in Bethlehem. Dr. Incalcaterra is a member of the Pennsylvania Dental Association, the American Dental Association, Second District Dental Association, and the Lehigh Valley Dental Society. He has served in many leadership positions throughout his membership, most recently as the president of the Pennsylvania Dental Association in 2019 to 2020. He is also a member of the International College of Dentists, Pierre Fauchard Dental Academy, and the American College of Dentists. He has also served as a delegate to the American Dental Association. Dr. Klingensmith will be role-playing with Dr. Incalcaterra. She graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 2016. She is also a past chair and current member of the New Dentist Committee. She is a member of the Dental Workforce Task Force. She's on the ADA New Dentist Committee and the ADA Annual Meeting Committee. She is also attending a residency at the Lehigh Valley 17th Street Hospital. She will also be the new dentist trustee for PDA starting at the end of this month. Dr. Incalcaterra has a lot of experience with advanced training enrollees and is very knowledgeable in guiding dental students and new dentists. We are just so pleased to have him sharing his knowledge with you tonight as we jump into tonight's presentation on interviewing tips. Okay, Dr. Incalcaterra, all you.
Okay, great. We did a little practice session a few minutes ago. I'll be quite honest with you. I'm technologically challenged a little bit, so I'm having trouble. I have to pull up my slides separately, so I will. If you give me just a few seconds here, I'll start my slide presentation on my own. But I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I know this is a really busy time of year for all of you. I assume we have a lot of D4s here tonight and probably some D3s and others as well. So welcome to everybody that's here. We realize that within a month and a half, many of you will be graduating from dental school and starting your careers, possibly started interviewing already. But if not, this is going to be a great lecture for you tonight, a nice presentation, because you'll be able to gain some ideas about what the interview process is all about and what kind of to expect. We're going to talk a little bit about questions that you should ask, and things that might be asked of you, and just some other tips altogether about that. So we'll start moving ahead. So go ahead to the next slide, please. So as it says on the slide there, it says any questions, just use the chat box, and then we'll answer those at the end. Okay, I'll be happy to stay on as long as we need to answer any questions that pop up. These are the disclosures that are required. You can probably read those right there, so I'm not going to read those to you. You can go to the next slide. Penn has a separate disclosure that we have to put up as well, so that one's there for you. All right, so this is our objectives for tonight. By the end of the lecture, you'll be familiar with the interview process, know how to prepare yourself for interviews in advance, become familiar with the questions you should ask of the people that you're interviewing, as well as those that might be asked of you, and know some interview follow-up strategies. And then the next lecture that we're going to have in a week from now is going to be talking about contracts. So we're going to be asking talking a little bit about what questions you should ask, once you get a contract. So that'll be next week, but I'm going to tease that a little bit tonight. So the interviewing for a job can be stressful but exciting, not only for you, but also for the practice that is trying to hire somebody. Because, you both want to be on your best display here. Obviously, you want to do the best you can to present yourself in a great way, but you also want to understand that the practice is trying to do the same thing, we hope, anyway. And you'll be able to figure that out. My criteria for accepting an interview, and not accepting an interview, but accepting a place to work at, is, would you want to be a patient in that practice? So if that answer is yes, then you know this might be the right practice for you. So that's something to keep in mind when you're interviewing. Do you want to not only work here, but would you want to be a patient here? So there's lots of ways of assessing that. There's different methods of how you'll be interviewed. I've heard of people being interviewed directly by the practice owner, which is usually the most common. Sometimes it's the practice manager who might do the initial interview and then kind of screen interviewers and invite you back to speak to the owner. There's also been times when some of the residents have been interviewed by a consultant who has been hired by the practice to work with hiring that person. So, and again, just like tonight, it could even be a virtual interview, although I think that's probably becoming less and less so since the pandemic is practically over. But, there always could be an opportunity, especially if you're going from a distance. You might be from California, you want to interview out there, you might be able to do a virtual interview, at least initially. So again, it's not only an opportunity for you to learn about the practice, but also the practice to learn about you. And, just remember this, ultimately, you're in control of your own destiny. So, it's up to you to make that final decision about where you want to be and where you think you're going to be most happy. So relax while you're in the interview. Make sure you breathe and be yourself. Next slide, please. So it's important that you go on as many interviews as you can and be really open to a variety of opportunities and locations. We've had a lot of discussions at the PDA level about the rural practices. And, I was just thinking about this recently because there was a female dentist that was on the board of trustees when I was there who had a very, very lucrative high-end practice up in the northeast part of Pennsylvania in a rural area. She was really close to the New York border. And she had difficulty finding people to work for her. But she was doing extremely well. I mean, it was $1 million practice. She was doing everything. She was placing implants. She was doing extraction. She was doing endo. She was really well trained and very knowledgeable about doing things in a comprehensive way. Because obviously in a rural area, it's going to be difficult to find sometimes the specialist that you need. So she was very, very in a good position. And, again, she was kind of the only game in town. So she was able to provide a lot of services and make a very good amount of money about that. But, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to be out that far. I want to be close to the city. If you own a rural practice and you're doing as well as she did, you can take time off. You could take 4 or 5 days off at a time. You could go to the cities. You can go visit your friends. You could take a week and go to, the West Coast and go on vacation. So there's a lot of opportunities that you have to kind of look at when you're looking at different practices and different models in different areas. So again, just don't be kind of focused on one spot. Just kind of, try to look at a lot of different areas and see if you can make yourself happy in a specific area. If you don't have a resume yet, get help in preparing a resume. I always think it's nice to have a small photo in the top right corner or top corner of your resume. This way, if they are interviewing a lot of people, your face will at least stand out to them. They'll remember you a little bit better. And I think that's a nice way to make sure that you're known. And then at the bottom of most resumes, people will put down personal references available on request. So you don't have to give those personal references to that practice right away, but I would prepare that as a separate list. And you can hand that to them if they want you to ask, if they want to ask for personal references. But make sure before you go on an interview that you tell your personal references, hey, I'm going on an interview at Dr. Kapoor's office, and they may be calling you. So, make sure that you let them know that that's maybe a possibility that they might be getting a call. But again, don't put those names on your resume. Just have that as a separate sheet of paper. And if they ask for it, you can hand that to them. Next slide, please. So do your research, and I apologize, there's a little typo there, but before the interview, do your research. Do take a look at the practice's website. And again, that'll maybe tell you a lot of information. If it's an attractive website, gives you a lot of information to the patients. Obviously, they're patient-centered and they're looking to do the best for their patients. So I think that's again, would I want to be a patient in this practice? And the practice website may be the first place you want to look at that. And then you can look at online reviews, but be very cautious about that. There's usually somebody who has negative comments. It's almost impossible to make everybody happy. So don't be overly critical if there's a few negative comments versus a ton of positive ones. But obviously, if there's a lot of negative comments, that's a red flag that you want to watch out for. You can check with the State Board of Dentistry website to see if there's any violations of a particular practice. Again, hopefully you're not interviewing in a practice that may be like that, but hopefully if you want to just be sure, you can check the State Board website. And then, see if the practice's professional approach and aligns with your values, okay? So they may have their mission statement or their value statement on the website. So if you can find that information, that's very important. And maybe take a look at the financial mix. I mean, the patient mix. I'm sorry, the patient mix on the website. Do they take kids? Do you want to work on kids? Is it mostly an older adult, or is it a mix? So that may be some information you can glean from the website. And we'll talk a little bit about financial stability about the practice in a little bit. So, all right, next slide, please. So it's important, and I know it's, as a student, it's a little difficult. If you're a resident and you have more experience in doing some cases that you can do within a year, it's really kind of important, though, to create a little bit of a portfolio. Look at some of the cases that you may have photos of. If you have pre and post photos, that might be great. Treatment plans that you may have developed in dental school and that you're working on or will be completing. It's kind of important to kind of document that so you can kind of show this to the practice and have your statistics ready. And again, I know in dental school that, especially if you're I know the requirements in schools are a little bit less than they used to be years and years ago, so your statistics may not be as great. But if you've done a number of dentures, a number of extractions, it's kind of important to kind of keep a track of those. And then, how fast are you in those particular items? And again, I'm going to say this many times over and over, but dental school, if you have a 3-hour session and you do an MO composite, it's not going to take you 3 hours in a practice. Okay, you'll have a dental assistant, you'll have all your supplies laid out, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can do a little bit of a time study on yourself, like from the time I picked up the handpiece to the time I stopped, and then I put the band on and put the composite in the tooth, et cetera, et cetera. You can kind of get an idea of your speed. Again, in a residency program, you'll get a little bit more experience if you do that. But you could kind of highlight about how quickly you think you can get things done. And highlight your goals and what specialty things you like. If you like doing extractions and you like doing endos and that's something that you're interested in doing, obviously everybody wants to do implants, but what kind of experience do you have right now? So it's important to kind of highlight the things that you're interested in when you're putting together a portfolio. So you can also put that in your resume. I enjoy working on endos and I like working on kids. Personally, I can't stand kids. I have 3 of my own that are now adults and I have a grandson. But I never really, as I got older, never really enjoyed working on kids. I liked it in the beginning, but things changed. So, but be honest about that, make sure that they know what you like and what you don't like. All right, next slide, please. So the face-to-face interview, it's important that you make a good impression on everyone. And I'm talking about the front desk staff, any dental assistant that you meet, the hygienist if you meet them, anybody else working in the office, treat them with courtesy and respect. Okay, you need to make a good impression on them as well as the owner of the practice. I can tell you a little story about the hospital. I was on an interview committee for a new executive at the hospital, and they told me that the people at the front desk downstairs are told that this person's coming in and that person is being watched by that particular person at the front desk on how they're treated. So if they come in and treat them like a real jerk, and then they treat the person in the elevator like a jerk, and then they get into the executive suite and they're wonderful and sweet as pie, everybody that they had contact with will report back to the CEO, the current CEO, as to the way that person's attitude was when they met them. So, and they've had times when they wouldn't hire somebody because the way they treated people who they thought were, under them or below them. So it's important that you make a great impression on everybody. If the front desk staff or anybody else in the practice besides the doc has business cards, ask for those business cards. Just ask for, can I have your card, please? Be pleasant, smile, show interest, have a positive attitude. That can be seen during the initial interview. Okay. They can't tell anything about your clinical skills, but they can tell how you act and how you interact with people. So be very, very positive. Show sincere interest in the practice situations. Find out why they're looking for somebody to join them. Did they lose an associate? Is the practice growing and they need to meet demand? Is the dentist thinking of retirement and looking for a transition at some point? So, show some interest in why the practice is looking for them. And then if you have a good experience with them before you leave, let them know that you've had a great interview. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Give them some positive feedback. I like what I've seen here. I see that your practice philosophy and mine match very well. Let them know that. If you didn't have a good interview and you're really not interested and you saw some things that you didn't like, stay neutral. Okay, don't say anything negative, but just say stay neutral. Just say, you have a nice office. Thank you for your time. And that's it. And then we'll talk about the next steps after that. So those are some of the things that you want to do in a face-to-face interview, and we'll go on after that. So I'm going to do a little practice session with Dr. Klingensmith next. Kayla, I can't see you, so again, I'm just gonna go off my slides, but
no worries, I'm here.
All right. So one of the things that we talked about was fidgeting during the interview. If you're fidgeting around, or if you've got a pen and you're clicking the button and things like that, playing with your fingers, etc. Those are some of the things that you want to kind of avoid. Don't fidget. Try to maintain eye contact with the person you're speaking with. Very important that you try to do that. Articulate it as best you can. Sometimes it's easy to get nervous and spill over words, and that's understandable. But try to be calm and relaxed and speak as fluently as you can. Just don't try to rush through things. Take your time. And nervous laughter, again, that's sometimes a difficult thing to fight. But try to maintain a little bit more of a professional. It's not a bad thing to laugh if something's funny, but laughing at inappropriately is at times a bit of a problem. So I'm going to interview Dr. Klingensmith, and we'll go from there. So Dr. Klingensmith, so what procedures do you enjoy the most?
Oh, that's a great question. Though I would say I actually really enjoy all of dentistry. I really am fascinated right now with taking teeth out, and I've just really become extraordinarily good at it. I also am really getting into digital dentures, and I'm excited to explore and grow in that.
So we don't do digital scanning in our practice. Is that going to be a problem for you?
No, I don't think so. I can manage with what we got, but I would love to discuss that with you in the future, though.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what procedures do you find the most challenging? What are the most difficult and things you don't like to do?
So I would say
For example,
the most challenge. What?
Oh, I was gonna say, for example, do you mind working on kids?
I actually don't mind working on kids. If they're working with me, I will gladly work on them. I find probably my biggest challenge is aesthetic cases, just because communicating with patients correctly and matching expectations, I think, is a really important thing to have. And I find that still very challenging, but also very rewarding.
Very good. What are your long-term goals? What are you looking for in a practice?
So I hope to own someday. I hope it can be here. And I hope that in the future I become a leader that commands respect, and both from my team and my patients.
Well, so are you very involved in organized dentistry right now?
I am super involved in organized dentistry. I was actually just in Chicago last weekend for a meeting with the new dentist committee. So I think the future of dentistry is very important, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Does that take a lot of time away from your practice if you're doing some of those things?
So far, it actually hasn't taken up too much time, and a lot of times I'm able to make it up or switch hours. I'm very flexible in that.
Okay, excellent. What can you bring to the practice that would really enhance things for me?
I think my communication style, I like to be very communicative with not only the front desk, but also with my assistants. I also really like to teach. I attended a residency as well. And so it's very easy for me to teach other new assistants or new team members what kind of new procedures I want to do. I'm very passionate about that.
Good. Last question, just describe your personality in a few sentences or a few terms.
Whimsical, honest, and kind.
Nice, very good. And I did say it was last question, but I do have one other question that just kind of came to me. How do you handle any kind of conflict, whether it be with a patient or with a colleague or anybody you've worked with? Have you had many conflicts, and how would you say you handle some of those?
Excellent question. I think that for me, conflict is something that happens few and far between. However, I am very one of those people that I want to face it head on, and I want to deal with it right in that moment. Because I don't like thinking about it too much. I tend to overthink those situations. I also like to come with a little bit more humbleness. That's how I was raised. So I'm usually the first one to kind of come down on I was part of the problem as well. And let's see if we can do better in the future.
All right, very nice. All right, so that's the end of our kind of little play thing here, but I just wanted to ask Dr. Klingensmith also to just give the audience a little bit about your experiences with how you've got to where you are, and you've obviously had to interview obviously for the residency program, but in other situations as well. So do you want to just kind of talk off the cuff about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came out of residency, I actually went on about 10 interviews, both at FQHCs and private practices. So I had a myriad of experiences with interviewing. Unfortunately, I had a lot of kind of not interested, but still interviewed me situations, which I will say is a little bit frustrating on the interviewee side of things. But the practice that I ended up with in the end was my last interview. And it was probably the best interview I've ever had, because not only was it with the owner, but it was with somebody from every department in the office. So the office manager was there, one of the front desk, one of the assistants, one of the other dentists. So I got interviewed with all of them, which was kind of a testament for the philosophy of the office, of it being a team. So the last interview, I've further left that office, but the last interview I was on was much different. They were actually looking to replace a current associate, so it was a much more secretive interview, and that I had to come in on a Sunday when nobody else was there, and it was just the doctors and the office manager. So if it's kind of like weird hours or it's off hours, there might be that situation going on, which I think can happen as well, unfortunately. And of course, you also want to know the reason why you're getting replaced, and nobody else can know about it. But I think that's the question that you have to kind of go around. So I will say that for the most part, I think I was over prepared for a lot of my interviews, which was great because you want to be the one who's over prepared. But I actually tried to pretty much memorize the website if it was there and try to learn everybody's names or at least know what their roles were. at that time. So I just try to be overly prepared every single time I go in, because in my opinion, that's not a problem. If you don't use all the information you found, by all means, that's a good thing.
That's great. And, and I just want to comment again about the secretive nature of the one interview went on. And, that may happen sometimes when a dentist is looking to retire.
Yeah.
They may not want their staff to know, so it may have to be on an off hour type of thing. And, just be respectful of that, obviously, for confidentiality of the practice. They may not want you letting anybody else know where you practice, where you interviewed and such like that. So just be sensitive to that if you have to do that. But thanks, that was great. Amanda, I forgot to say next slide, which was Dr. Klingensmith's name slide, so I apologize for that, but there she is. So the next slide, yeah, there we are. These are some of the questions that I did just ask Dr. Klingensmith, and I'll just kind of review these again. So I'll start with the top. What can you bring to the practice? For example, what skills do you have? What can you do to help the practice grow? The practice may be looking for somebody to develop or run their Facebook page or Instagram, posts and such like that. So is that something that you may be able to bring to the practice that might help to enhance it? Which procedures did you enjoy most and which are most challenging for you? Obviously, again, you're going to have some likes and dislikes. I think Dr. Klingensmith answered that very well, saying she liked a lot of things, but, especially liked to do digital dentures and things like that. Again, how much time might you need for a single crown, a molar endo, those type of things. Again, as a student, of course, I've said this many times over, it's going to be difficult to gauge that, but you should kind of try to do a little time study of your own if you can in the next few months and see. This question about what's your future plans, that can be a kind of a double-edged sword as well, because, you could say, by accident, you could say, my husband, my wife is in a residency and, they're going to be going to Texas and, that's where they want to practice. Well, already you kind of said, oops, I'm not going to be here for a long time. So when you talk about future plans, if you are looking for something that's just an interim, you have to be kind of careful about how you talk about that. I don't have any good, answers for that, but just be aware that you could let something out of the bag if you're not careful about, if your plans are going to change in the near future. And again, long-term goals, are you interested in purchasing a practice? Do you want to go to some additional continuing education? Do you want to gain some hands-on skills at a course, So, again, coming out of dental school, you may not have, been very adept at placing implants, and you could just say, what, I really want to take a surgical course in placing implants, and that's something I'd like to bring to the practice, and that's some of the questions that you might be asked. A few others, next slide, please. I did talk a little bit about this. How would you handle a difficult or upset patient or parent or coworker? Have you had any conflicts with any coworkers, and how did you handle that? Describe your personality. She did very well on that one as well. Yeah, there we are, right, that slide. Are you open to working late or on weekends? Okay, so there may be times when the practice wants to expand their hours, and is that going to create a conflict for you? If you were asked to work on evenings and such like that. And what are you looking for as an associate? What are you looking to bring to the practice, and what kind of things do you want to do? So those are some of the questions that you might be asked. What are you looking for as an associate in this practice? Okay. All right, our next slide. So we're going to switch this over now to questions that you should be asking about the practice, to kind of get yourself a little bit more information and just to show some interest in the practice as well. And the note on the bottom of that slide, I'll start with that. Never lead off with a question about compensation or benefits. That's not going to be your first question. How do I get paid? How much do I get paid? What kind of, pay structure? That can be just addressed in the contract in the future if you're offered a contract. However, you can bring it up as part of the conversation a little bit more casually later on. Okay, so the main thing is don't lead off with it, because that will be addressed if you're ever offered a contract. But at some point in the conversation, you could ask about that. And there are different compensation methods. Sometimes they'll start you out with a daily guarantee, and then a percentage of collections or a percentage of production. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these things about this in our next lecture next week on contracts. But again, don't start off with the first thing is like, how do I get paid? Because that's just not, not what you want to do. It's not professional. It's not, a question you should lead in with. So, you can ask things about which you may know. Again, you may have seen this on their website, but what are your practices, treatment philosophies? How do you treat your patients? At my own practice, my philosophy is I treat my patients like I want to be treated. Okay, like they're my family, and I want to give them the best dentistry that I can, at an affordable rate. So that's kind of my philosophy, is to treat people. It's a patient-centered type of philosophy. Okay. What would your expectations of me as an associate be? So would I be limited to certain procedures? Do you offer mentoring to associates? And if you do offer mentoring, how does that work? And I'll tell you, I had a conversation with one of my residents the other day about, she's got a nice offer for one practice, but there's not a whole lot of mentoring. And whereas she's looking for that. And I said, well, quite honestly, you really have to kind of find out for sure what the mentoring would be like, because they may not have time to mentor you. Now, if the mentoring is like, hey, I'd like to present a treatment plan to you, that's one thing. Or I have a difficult case, I have some study models, can we go over what how we can approach that? That's fine. But you're not going to get a whole lot of over the shoulder type of mentoring, I don't think, in a busy practice. So that's something that if you want to ask about mentoring, ask how that works. How would they be able to do that? What's the schedule? Okay, what days and hours would you work? And what are the on-call duties? Is there going to be office hours? Are you going to be called in at night, or can you handle things over the phone if you're on call? I never go into my office personally anymore after hours unless I have a dental assistant with me. First of all, I don't know where everything is in my office, but secondly, just from a safety standpoint and from being able to provide the best care that I can for a patient, I almost always want to have my dental assistant with me. So if you're required to go in after hours, is there going to be a dental assistant? Okay, and there may not be, but just, ask those questions. And then, would you be considered an independent contractor or an employee of the practice? We're going to get into a lot more details on that in the next lecture, but that's an important thing that you'll need to know, because there's a lot of consequences to being considered independent contractor from a tax standpoint versus an employee. So you can ask those questions as well. All right, next slide, please. So what specific things are you hoping that an associate can bring to the practice? That's a question you can ask, okay? What kind of insurance plans do you participate with? And the reason I ask you this is because reason I mention this is because if they're a practice that's in a lot of PPO plans, and depending on how the compensation will be, so if you're paid by collections, let's say the normal fee for a crown in this practice is $1,200, and they're in an insurance plan that accepts $700 for the crown. Okay, so you're not going to get a percentage of the $1,200 for that crown that you did. You're going to get a percentage of the $700. Okay, so that's going to negatively impact your income. So if you find out that it's a very heavy PPO practice that has a lot of low-paying insurance programs, that's something you want to know about. So you can ask how that works. What are the policies that you have for payment for collections and insurance? So again, in my practice, we know the copay. My practice manager looks up the insurance that the patient has, and they're going to say, okay, at the end of the procedure today, it's going to be, $327.86. And how would you like to pay that today? So is that how they do it, or do they send out a lot of bills? Again, the quicker that the practice gets paid, the quicker you will get paid in the future. So you may want to ask what kind of policies they have in place for collections and payments. Ask about the patient base. Is it a lot of geriatric patients? Is it a lot of families? Are there a lot of kids? So you want to kind of have that information that you're going to know about what the practice is going to be like when you're going in. And how do you grow your practice? Do you actively market your practice? How do you do that? Are you on Instagram? Are you on Facebook? Are you on other media? Are you involved in the community? Do you sponsor a softball team or something like that? How do you grow your practice? What do you do? And then, again, what are the current goals of the practice? What's the future goals of the practice? What does the practice look like in the next 5 to 10 years? And then the last thing I didn't put on here is, are they referring a lot of procedures out? So again, if you like doing endos and they're referring a lot of the endos out, and you're willing to take a little more extra continuing education to get adept at endo, You can ask those questions. Are you referring a lot of procedures out? What are those procedures? And is that something that maybe I could bring to the practice for you? All right, next slide. Great. So after the interview, okay, I think it's really important that the interview is wrapped up. You've gotten a lot of information. You've asked questions. You've been asked questions. I think it's really important to send a personal thank you note that's handwritten. So my suggestion to you is buy a stack of thank you notes ahead of time. Okay, Dr. Klingensmith went to 10 interviews. If she had a stack of notes and, you know, got Mary Smith, the front desk person's card, dear Dr. Jones, I really enjoyed, you know, interviewing with you today. Mary Smith was such a great, welcoming person at the front desk, and I felt very comfortable there. I'd love to pursue this in the future with you. Seal that note, have a stamp on it, go to the nearest post office and drop it off before you drive home. Okay. For them to get a handwritten note in a day or two would be really such an impressive thing on you from their perspective about you that would really make you stand out. So I think a personal handwritten thank you note, if you really like the practice, would be an important thing to do. If you haven't heard from the practice in 2 or 3 days, you know, get in touch with them, whether it's by email or call or whatever, and just let them know that you're still interested, if you truly are still interested. If you're not, obviously don't do that. And the other thing you can consider is offering to do a working interview, you know, which is where you'll sit down for maybe half a day and see a few patients and get to work inside the practice. And there's a lot of interesting things you can get from that. You can work with a dental assistant one-on-one, see how that practice works, you know, how they are with their materials, their supplies and things like that. And, you know, that's a really kind of a nice way to get to know the practice a little bit more. If you do that, obviously you have to have your dental license. So, you know, you can't do that until you have your dental license. You'll have to have liability insurance of some sort. I know the PDA offers a fairly inexpensive liability insurance for first year out. So, and I don't know what the fee is now, but I know years ago it was like $50. So don't quote me on that, but see if the PDA has something that you could use. You know, and if you're working, there should be a written agreement, whether it's by email or whatever, you know, here's what we expect of you today. And then you should be compensated. I mean, you know, you're going to bring value to the practice. One of my residents did a few fillings and did an endo. I think it was an anterior tooth, but she did an endo start to finish. Well, that's a few, you know, that's a lot of money it brought into the practice, and you should get some sort of compensation, whether it's a few $100 or whatever. So I would think that, you know, if you're offered a working interview, just ask, is there compensation available for this? So I think that's very important. All right, so our next slide. So you got an offer, and now what? So this is, again, a little teaser for the next next type of lecture that we're going to have next Tuesday night. You know, length of the contract. Is it something that's going to renew automatically? How do you get compensated? Is it production, collection, salary? Who pays lab fees? Hours and locations. Important to know about locations, because if you have a practice that has multiple offices and you have to work in multiple offices, that's going to extend your restrictive covenant. We'll talk about that a little bit more. You want to have in writing, you know, on-call emergency calls. How does that work out for you? Benefits, and is there an office manual, an employee manual? And are those benefits spelled out in that? So you're going to want to know that. You know, what kind of benefits will you get? Is there insurance plan? Is there a retirement plan? Is there CE? Is there malpractice? Is there also membership in PDA or other dental organizations? And is there a restrictive covenant? And is that negotiable? So that's something we're going to talk about next week too. Next slide, please. You know, you want to talk about equipment and supplies. Again, you want to know that you know, that you'll be given a chair, that you'll have a dental assistant available to you. Do you have any administrative responsibilities? Is there anything that you have to do as a doc in the office that, you know, may be a responsibility for you? Are you responsible for, say, you know, I don't know, making sure your room is fully stocked and you have the right supplies that you want? You know, I don't, there's many things that you could be asked to do. How are new patients allocated? Is it every other patient goes to, you know, each doc in the practice, or how does that work? Do you get compensated for hygiene exams? A lot of times the hygienist will do the prophy, they'll do the x-rays, and you won't get compensated for that, but you should get compensated for the time that you spend going in and doing the exam. Sometimes that doesn't happen, so that should be there. Do they need to hire new staff for you? And will you be involved in interviewing the new staff person? Is there a time frame? Is there a buyout or buy into the practice as a partner, or buyout as a complete owner? And is there any real estate or lease that's involved in a practice transition? So again, those are some of the things we're gonna hit a little bit next time. So I think I'm pretty much done with my part. Amanda, you have a few more slides. Are you going to chat about some of those as well, or is that for me to talk to the students about?
No, I will go over the next few slides. Thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Great.
So April 11th at 7 p.m., that is next Tuesday, will be Dr. Incalcaterra's part 2 on associate agreements and contracts. If you would like to scan this QR code here, it'll take you right to the Zoom registration. And then if you have any questions or issues, you can email me down here, arb@padental.org. And then we do offer a PDA connections program. We can match you with a mentor based on practice type, practice location, and specialty. So visit padental.org/connections, or you could email me as well, and I can forward your email, and we will get you set up with a mentor. And then there is, through the ADA, practice transitions. This match is based on philosophy of care, templates and tools to put your best foot forward. And there are opportunities nationwide as well. So this will be on ada.org/adapt.
Can I just mention something about that too? So it's not only for practice transitions, but also if you're looking for a position in a practice as an associate. So you can go onto ADA Adapt, you create a profile, and you can say, I'm looking to buy a practice, I'm looking to become an associate, all these type of things. So it's not just for practice transitions, but also for practice hiring. There's no charge at all to the people who are applying. I think there's a small fee to the practices that might be hiring or selling their practice, but it's a great way to get nationwide exposure.
Yes. And then, so after this event, look at your email. There will be a post-webinar survey. Fill it out and you can receive an Amazon gift card. And then we do have some questions here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will read these off to you. Okay.
Oh, wow. I'm just reading the chat, and yeah, we did not practice this ahead of time.
Yeah.
She did not see those questions, and she did very well. And thanks for asking. That was a good question.
Yeah. Also, if you noticed, I used a lot of techniques to give myself a little time. I use this with patients as well, like saying, that's a great question. Ooh, that's a challenging one. It gives you a little bit more time to think about your answer. Even just giving a slight pause and just okay. So there's a couple of little things that you kind of get used to doing when you're kind of put on the spot, and you get put on a spot a lot as a dentist. So
yeah, patients can be challenging as well.
Yeah.
And then, do you ever organize a webinar on how to write a business plan? We do not specifically have one on that, but that is something that PDA could consider in the future as well. So thank you for that suggestion.
And I know, I'm sorry, I'm going to plug the ADA is having a how-to on writing a business plan. Let me look it up because it's coming up, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So that's like a perfect question for right now. So I'm going to be on my phone for a second.
Awesome. And then the next question is, as a recent graduate, how do you compete for available positions against dentists with years and years of experience?
I mean, I could probably answer a little bit of that, but I'm not adept at that. But I just think that there's, a lot more young dentists coming out of school, and people who have had years and years of experience usually are pretty stable. I don't know if that's always true, but it's unless they're very unhappy in the practice that they're in. But I think a lot of times that dentists are looking to young graduates to come out of school and join their practices and grow, especially if they want something long term. So that's a great question, but it's a very difficult one to answer, I think. Kayla, do you anything on that?
I think you can definitely sell it as being room to grow. Like, you know, you're not set in your ways, you know, you're very pliable, you're moldable, you want to learn, you're excited. So I think that honestly, the energy aspect of it is huge. I think there is something to be said about that. For sure, that you're not like, I only do this, this, and this. And, you know, be very open to be like, hey, I'm still learning. I really want to grow. So I think there is something to be said about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, as a recent grad, there are certain jobs coming right out of residency that I wasn't prepared for and I wasn't ready for. So you also got to recognize that some people have wild expectations about their associates and you don't want to be there. I also added the Zoom link. If somebody can just make sure that it worked, that's the webinar that the ADA is doing on business plans. I believe it's coming up. So cool. Beautiful.
That's great. You know, that's really a really good point. I'll tell you an experience I had as a program director at the hospital. I was at an ADEA meeting, American Dental Education Association meeting, and I met this oral surgeon. I think he ran the program at UConn. And I said, you know, we have a lot of residents that, you know, like to go into oral surgery. He goes, I don't want residents coming into oral surgery because what happens is they learn in their program a certain way to do things, and I've got to unteach that to them. I'd rather have the dental students coming out of school and I can teach them my way. So she makes a great point. That would be a good way to approach it. You know what? I want to learn from you. You know, I think our philosophies might line up very well, but I'd like to learn. I'd like to kind of, you know, have you as a mentor and, you know, help mold me into becoming the dentist that you are. So throw a little smoke up there, you know?
Everybody loves a compliment.
Yeah. All right, great.
Are there any other questions? Give you a couple minutes if you have any.
So, you know, if anybody's not a D4 and they're not, you know, if obviously if you're a D4, you probably have already, you know, gotten accepted into a residency program. But if you're not, and I don't know who's out there today, but you know, really consider that. I think that's very important. I think dental school has too much to teach nowadays in too little time. And so a residency program is going to give you a lot of that speed, experience, confidence, and advanced training that you really could use. So again, I'm hoping not just talking to D4s that may not be doing that, but it's something to really consider for the future if you're younger, because it's important to you know, to get that extra experience, and that kind of is a leg up, I think, on dental students coming out of school.
There was one more question here. What would be the best way for new grads to find jobs?
So, you know, I know you mentioned the mentoring program, the connections program, Amanda, but you know, when I do a lecture to my residents, and I will tell you that the PDA just updated the website, so I have to go through it again. But I give a lecture to the residents every year going over the key parts of the website. And what I found on there, for the PDA at least, and you can probably look at any state website if they let you into their area where they post jobs. Okay, so there's job posts. Are people involved in dental nachos? I can't see any faces, so I imagine you're all shaking your heads. Yes, everybody does dental nachos. You know, I know Dr. Goodman has job opportunities that he posts. You know, there's lots of opportunities out there. I'm sure the ADA has a listing of opportunities across the nation too. You know, we get the PDA journal and the ADA journal, and when by the time you get those job opportunities that have been printed are probably, you know, a month gone already. So I think if you do something on a website that's real time, that's the best way to do it.
Can I also add to that I also think that if you know where you want to be, then connecting to local societies, even when you're in dental school, can be super helpful, because sometimes those job postings are not there, or they're like thinking about an associate, and if they find the right person, then sometimes that can happen kind of naturally too.
Yeah, it's great. That's a great point. You know, just get yourself out there, go to CE meetings at the local dental societies or district dental societies, and, you know, make some connections to the leaders and just get your name out there, you know, let them know. So there was a question about extracurricular activities. So do extracurricular activities, leadership positions, etc., matter when applying for jobs, or just matter of clinical experience? You know, I think it's both. Obviously, again, if you're coming out of dental school, we're not going to expect you to have the the great clinical experiences. So if you have some other things, you know, I'll put a plug in right now. Mom and PA is coming up to Allentown, June 2nd and 3rd. You probably have heard about that. I'm one of the chairpersons of the Allentown thing. So, you know, putting those extra things like that, if you've done mission trips out of the country, held leadership positions, and you should put all those on your resume. Okay, when you're putting together a resume, obviously, like I said, you're not going to have a whole lot of endos under your belt. But, you know, if I've seen that you've been involved in a lot of organizations, you're a go-getter, that's going to be a very important you know, thing to put on your resume, because it shows that you're a little bit more active and involved and engaged. So I think that's a key kind of part of your personality.
And I think it depends on how involved the dentist is involved in like a certain thing. Like if you're really into organized dentistry and they're really in organized dentistry, like that's gonna matter. That's gonna matter to them for sure. But yeah, I think, you know, you'll find the right place.
Yeah. I saw the link go up from Mom and PA, and as a dental student, please sign up as a dental student. Okay, because there's different categories you have to sign up for. And what happens with as dental students is everybody wants to be in oral surgery, but you can't all be in oral surgery. So what's going to happen is you'll be assigned to a certain part of the clinic for part of the day, and then, you know, part of the other clinic for the other part of the day. So you'll get some experience in seeing a little bit of everything. But sign up as a dental student. And it's helpful if you can use your EDU address. I know that you may be graduating, but I think those last a little longer, don't they? If you have your dental school address, the email address, those last. It helps to make sure that we know that you're a dental student and not a college student or a high school student. We've had a few high school students sign up and they can't. So anyway, it's been great. We really appreciate your attention tonight. Again, best of luck to you. And I hope you all do consider signing up for next week's lecture. That's a little bit more involved, a little bit more detailed, but it's got some really great information, I think, on things. Because what happens is over the years, you know, I was program director for 27 years, and residents would come to me with contracts, and I'd take a look at things, and I'd see some things that were red flags for me and some things that were really great. So we're going to talk about the whole thing about contracts and what's good and what's bad in contracts. I'll have some samples highlighted of some of the things that are, you know, good in contracts and some of the things that are definitely red flags. So lots of great information there, and I hope you'll have the time to chat with us. So again, thanks for tonight, and hope you all do well in the next couple of weeks of school.
Yes, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Dr. Incalcaterra and Dr. Klingensmith, for your guys' wonderful presentation. And everybody, look for your email. I will be sending out the survey as well as some of the links we talked about today, and the link for next week's webinar. So just be on the lookout for that email then as well. And I hope everybody has a wonderful night and rest of your week.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Kayla.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, guys.
Bye.